live. Hi, this is Eli Oakletree of the SnoKing Beekeepers Association, and this is our third Wednesday monthly meeting, April 21st. We're going to have a guest speaker, Cassie Seahorse, who will speak on the Asian giant hornet, the latest on the greatest vested predator that we have seen in these parts. I'm going to start with some announcements first, though. So there's always announcements. You never get out of them. Meetings open to the public. Oh, the biggest thing is classes. And right now we have all three levels going: beginner, apprentice, and journeyman. And it looks like we're on Zoom. You know, I can't see that we're going to be doing face-to-face anytime soon. So in addition to being online for the foreseeable future, we're working on an online testing system, which makes my life a lot easier because I don't have to grade. Even though I think it's wonderful you take the test, it takes me a lot of time to grade. So we're trying this online testing system, and it seems to be working for the journeyman well. They have to do online because they are closed book and timed. So they were stuck with being the guinea pigs for the beta version. But I think that will make things easier. People can still send me a snail mail. It's like paying. If you really want to pay with snail mail check, I understand. But this might make everything easier for everyone. The beginner, we are going to start the beginner course probably the 13th. I haven't quite made the announcement yet. In the apprentice, we're halfway through now. And in the summer, if there's demand. So people have to let me know that they really would like an apprentice course, because there's not as big a demand, and the fall is a wonderful time to take it. Late in the summer, the fall, while you're getting ready for winterizing, it's actually a good time to sit down and review everything again and go in a little deeper into things. The journeyman, if people are interested in the journeyman class and they missed it, that's great. Let me know, okay? If you'd like to start again. And actually, really, seriously, like October, November are wonderful times to take a class. It's, if you could sneak it in before the holidays or right after the holidays, right at the beginning, right after the new year, start a class then. Trust me, that's the easiest time for everybody. Well, I'm going to skip these because Cassie's going to cover that. And I'm just going to talk for a short while. Cassie's here. Hi, Cassie. And I'm just going to go ahead and talk for a while, and then about 7 o'clock, Cassie will come on and give you what you're really waiting for. I mean, the really great information.
Pull the rope behind Cassie's truck.
Yep, I'm pulling into my house right now, so I'll be on my computer in about 5 minutes.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead. People love to listen to me talk. That's why they, no, actually, I know you came for Cassie. Okay, I'm going to talk on Varroa. I know it's the V word. I just don't want to hear any more about Varroa. But I thought we never do enough specifics. So I spent actually today putting together the most specific things I could say. Which two Varroa treatments can you use on packages? There's not just one, there's two. I was surprised to find that out while I'm doing my research. And things like that. Which one at which temperature? And I've made a chart, which a lot of you have seen, but I'm updating it, and I'll put what I'm saying tonight as best I can in that chart. And I think I better put the slides on a PDF too, and put them under files on the group discussion page. And I always warn people, you know, a lot of this is my opinion. And one thing that's always puzzled me about Varroa is one person says theirs worked, another person says no. This person absolutely swears by Timol, and this person says, you must be kidding. It was like dumping water on my bees. As soon as they dried off, it was the end of it. Water in the summertime, not water in the winter. And anything I can come up with, any chart or any instructions, is never going to be a substitute for reading the instructions. But boy, did I understand why people are confused. I thought I was using some of these correctly, and I'm not sure I ever read these instructions in this detail. And there's really two issues when you talk about Varroa. There's the monitoring issue and the treatment issue. And I don't really want to get into the monitoring. I guess actually I could say one quick thing on monitoring, but the honest truth is everyone knows you're supposed to do the alcohol washes. and we're finally getting to where it's warm enough you could do them. But about half the year, usually just because of the weather, it's not realistic for us to do it. And we don't want to disrupt the honey flow. So that's another reason we don't do it during that time of the year, because every time you take all the honey supers off, get all the way down to the brood nest, if you are doing a correct alcohol wash. So if you're doing that, then you've totally disrupted everything. And during the honey flow, we want our honey, right? That's the reward for them. It's like I keep waiting for my grandkids. But my daughter's 40 and she doesn't look like she's ever going to get married. So anyway, I'm out for adoption as a grandmother in case anybody's interested. But getting back on track, there's this best thing you're supposed to do, which is the alcohol wash, sugar roll kind of. And the worst thing is sliding out the board and looking at the mites that fell because they couldn't get into capped brood. At this time of the year, that's the worst because there's capped brood. I mean, your queens are trying their best to lay like crazy. And so they're providing lots and lots of opportunities for Varroa females to crawl into the brood right before it caps. And actually what we often do, and sometimes we don't say this outright, is most of the Varroicides require multiple applications or multiple doses spaced so many weeks apart, days or a week. 7 to 10 days is really common. And actually, I'd never done some of these, so I never realized that most people don't know that a lot of them are designed for you to do 3 treatments, not just put it on your little wafers or your strips once. If you read the instructions, they actually intend 2, 3. Oh, and if it's a serious infestation, 4 times, and that's considered 1 application. That's the way the manufacturers are thinking. And if you know the cost of your strips and you kind of started pricing them out, at $5 or $10 a strip, you start going, wait, that I didn't factor that into the budget. But okay, so I gave up kind of on the monitoring. I'll let you figure out whether you're just going to go ahead and do the first dose and watch the mite fall on your slide out, which is not considered the best. But at this time of the year, and especially right before this, if you already started a month ago and the weather wasn't good enough to really do alcohol washes, you should see almost no mites on your boards right now, even if you have a lot of mites in your hive, because they should all be getting into the cap as fast as they can and spending as little time as they can riding around on an adult bee, which is where almost every Varroicide works and where the only places it works. Formic acid claims it goes inside the capped brood, but then formic acid is the one that's known for killing queens and killing brood if it's misused. So I think, what time is it? I could do just a little bit more, and I think Cassie's ready to come on. Treatment. All the treatments are so different. I got so confused just reading the instructions on the number that I put on the treatment chart, which is that's only 8, and I got really, really confused. The temperature range, okay, there's a lot of them that are affected from 60 degrees up, but there's some that you don't want to put them in when there might be a 90-degree day because it could really hurt your hive. You could actually kill off quite a bit. And there's others, they work best at 104 degrees. I was surprised to see that. So I went through this and tried to divide up those 8 in some way that made some kind of logical sense. Temperature range, the number of doses is really important. I now understand why a lot of people, especially the first year, don't try my favorite treatments. And you develop a favorite treatment. Sometimes it's what you're comfortable with. You like the smell of it. I mean, it's actually like the Thymol. I mean, you could kind of like the smell of that. But how many visits can you make? Is it an out apiary? How many times can you go into your hive? How many times do you want to do this per year? The ventilation of the hive, that's hard to watch if you're not home or you're not at an out apiary. How dangerous do you feel it is? How much personal protective equipment do you will have to put on? Just a second. Okay. And ventilation. opening and closing ventilation if you need to do that. So there's kind of some generalities about varroa that I was thinking about, and almost all of them get into the wax and the honey. And so some people say, okay, then I don't care if oxalic acid gets in because it's naturally found there. I don't care if formic acid naturally gets in there because it's found there. And the EPA agrees with that, for example. I don't want the hop guard or the thymol, even though they're not poisonous, I don't want them tainting my honey. Even if it says they can, I'm going to be very, very careful. If you've ever worked with hop guard, it's the slimy one with the brown goo all over the strips. Once you do it, you will never want to do it again. I guess organically, if you're doing organics, it is, I believe, accepted by the organic programs. And the volatile ones, some people just are not comfortable with taking that into their lungs. And actually, I was surprised. Most of the instructions did not say get a respirator. I don't want to breathe in acids, and they're pretty intense acids. When you're sublimating oxalic acid and that formic acid, that stuff's pretty intense. And we got all these N95s left from this whole COVID shutdown thing. Hang on to a couple of them. Just put them in a Ziploc, and if you get formic acid on those or something, you're not going to mind using them once and throwing them away. Maybe you don't feel that they're really going to help protect you from anything after a certain number of days of wearing them for protection against viruses or whatever, but they might be good enough to give you some protection. And then for all the treatments, sometimes people forget it's just a general thing. Have your cell phone. There's an emergency. You want to be able to call somebody. And you can also take a picture too. That's a good idea of what you did, where you put things. You should have water available. Almost everything says if you get it in your eye, start rinsing. Right, I'm now 300 feet from my house. A couple jugs of water would be a really good idea. The more you can rinse, the faster. The more you can get things diluted down, the better off you are, just in case there's a splash. Someone pointed out that the new Provate that everybody's into, if they are doing oxalic acid, people will eventually say, okay, I'll invest in this one that's really fancy, but you are putting the solid acid back on the instrument before it's cooled. And then you're flipping it over, but it can pop off apparently. So people were saying you need full face protection, like the drop over face shields. And again, if you picked one of those up for COVID, this is a great time to keep it for beekeeping. Disposable gloves. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, I just light the smoker and I watch which way the wind goes. Well, that's really hard to do. That's not really a good way to protect your lungs. One thing is when you're buying or using it, check the expiration dates. And I know I've got some formic that's not looking right. I opened it up, I knew it was past expiration, and it's definitely not as powerful, as potent as it was before. You need to actually dispose of all this as a hazardous waste, not the compost pile, not where the kids with pets can get to it, okay? I don't know why, but they just love finding things like this, right? And chewing on it. Oh, marking what you're storing. Little kids don't know the difference between oxalic acid bleach powder. It looks like sugar. They wouldn't know the difference. And I remember there was a bee store handing it out in Ziplocs unmarked. It didn't even say oxalic acid on it, much less have a Mr. Yuck sticker or something like that a kid would have a chance. My boys, when they were little, they'd have had that Ziploc open in no time tasting it. I mean, they were like that. My boys, boy, they were something else. You need to mark your calendar. Almost all the treatments, I'm surprised, are multiple treatments, and I have not heard people using them talking about using them for multiple treatments. And there is the problem of if you don't treat all the hives simultaneously, they're just going to get reinfected. So maybe fewer treatments for the hive that you don't think has a serious infection. You start the one, and then maybe more treatments for the one that you are detecting heavier infestation. And really understanding the bee and Varroa brood cycles really, really helps. I know I push that a lot if you take my classes. I think the slide outs are really useful, not because they trap mites, but because you can count the mite drop. That gives you a before and an after, especially the mite drop. If you're opting for doing especially if you're opting for the mite drop where you are doing a preliminary, you're doing the first dose to see if you have mites, which is not the approved method. The approved method really is monitoring by alcohol wash, sugar roll, and the slide out sheet doesn't really work. But if you need to make your own slide out, you can actually just take a manila folder, anything like that that's a little bit stiffer than paper. But butcher paper would probably work, except it would curl up. Think about a manila folder. It'd probably be okay to put vegetable oil, not anything animal, because you don't want to attract those stupid yellow jackets and ants or anything else, right? Beehives are already attract enough things. If you have a slide out board, you already know that. And you can't get out of reading the instructions. I'm really surprised at some of these. I've heard people talking about their mite treatments, and I really don't think too many people read the whole thing. So if you are one of the people who reads all the instructions, I don't want to slam the guys too much, but pat yourself on the back, okay? Big pat on the back. If you are reading the instructions, it was interesting reading 8 sets of instructions to come talk on this. I was looking at the temperatures and trying to put, okay, which ones are the best for the temperatures? Okay, well, yeah, you can use, this is the Thymol one that comes in the black, like I usually hear people call them wafers. The instructions call them tablets. Comes and you break them apart and you put them in the 4 corners of the brood. Black type wafer tablets. But it's less effective if it's less than 54 still. But we are coming up to where, so this is more of a summer. This is almost you're into nectar flow in this area. Best at 64 to 95. So it can handle up to 95. The Apiguard is the other Thymol. Yes, 60 to 105 degrees. That one, I think, was the one that said it actually is most effective at the higher temperatures. The more heat, the better. Mighty Way Quick Strips, one of the Formics. I was looking at that. Now Formic is tricky, and people either love it or hate it. It's like they can make it work or they can't. They swear they lose their queens, or they swear it's not a problem. And looking at the instructions, I think I can see why. You really have to know which one you have. Formic Pro is the other one. I know everybody's waiting for Cassie. Let's see. Cassie, are you not? Now let's give Cassie another 10 minutes because I said 7. I shouldn't rush her. Okay. I know you're waiting though. You're being very polite listening to me though. I appreciate that. I had never thought about what's different about oxalic acid until I was reading 8 sets of instructions. And oxalic acid can be used at any temperature. It's a little controversial because of the way the EPA label reads of that. But it's a flash treatment. That's what's different about it. It doesn't continue to release. Everything else you put in the hive to kill mites releases, or it is a contact. The bees are into contact with it over a long period of time, meaning days. Whereas oxalic acid is zap. So, and I have a term, flash treatment. The 2 that can be used on packages, and well, nukes, of course, you could probably use anything on. And the one you knew about probably already, because everybody says, well, it's the only one, is oxalic acid. You dissolve the spray according to the EPA label. I didn't look it up. It's kind of something like 1-to-1, I think. Sugar to water syrup. So you're putting this acid, and in case you've never done a lot of dissolving things, you usually put it in a small amount first. You don't put it in the whole liter or gallon or whatever you're going to mix up. Yeah, I hate chasing those little lumps around. So I usually make sure, just like making gravy or white sauce or anything, you add the liquids, so add the syrup after you get it broken up and dissolving. And Hop Guard. There's the second one. I didn't know that Hop Guard is actually used inside the packages. When you buy a package of bees, they staple half strips inside, apparently. Who would have thought? And it's a contact. There's the volatiles and there's the contact. Hop Guard is a contact. And oxalic acid is a contact too. And the bees are touching it and moving around with it. In the case of hop guard, they're passing it to each other as they take it throughout the hive. They walk on the strips, pick it up, and go throughout the hive. Then, and you just do one strip instead of 2 strips for 10 frames, you do 1 strip for 5 frames of bees. So, Mite Away Quick Strips. Okay, there's 2 Formics, Mite Away Quick Strips and Formic Pro. I think the confusion starts here. Now they are almost identical in a lot of ways. You get packets of 2 strips and you separate them on the brood frame, and you place them on the tops of the brood frames, not hanging down, but on top, flat on top, 1 or 2 deeps. You kind of try to space them so that you're getting the maximum coverage, like 1 on the top of the upper, and then 1 lower, not above each other, but kind of trying to get the maximum volatility. Oh, one mistake people make is there's 2 wrappings. The 2 strips are inside a wrapping. Take that wrapping off. Don't remove the inner wrapping. And it kind of almost falls off on you. You don't, because that is what slows the release of the formic acid. Many, many years ago, beekeepers knew that formic acid killed Varroa, and they tried to put liquid into the hives. A lot of beekeepers killed their hives. You put the liquid in, it evaporates too fast. There's nothing to slow the release. That inner wrap around each of the strips is what slows the release. People, I don't know if they ever did this. For some reason, you can put liquid oxalic, I guess because it dries on the bees fast. Liquid formic, I think they were putting it inside the hive in a pool. Now, after you put these on 1 or 2 deeps, it's supposed to penetrate the capped brood. Some people don't agree with that. There is a risk to the queen. This is the one Varroa side where they say this is risk to the queen. So you are to come back and make sure that you are queened right a month later. And people complain about the die-off at the entrance. If you read the instructions, it says, oh, don't worry about that. You're going to have about 1 day's worth of bee mortality. Okay, the queen is laying at the rate of 1,000, 1,500 a day. That means bees are actually dying at that rate. But when you see that dump of bees right at your entrance, it is freaky. But what the instructions are telling you is those are the ones that the amount that would have flown out the hive in that day, taken themselves away to die as their last duty to the hive, keeping the hive clean by taking their poor little decaying corpses out, away from the hive and dropping. Or the undertaker bees would pick them up and fly out with them. So 1 day is a lot. I mean, that's 1,000, 1,500 bees easily. The bearding is normal because you just stunk up the hive. If you smelled formic, get a snootful of that. See, I would wear a respirator personally. There's just no way that you're not going to drop a strip, fumble opening it, and have to sit there while you're trying to. It's really hard to hold it at an arm's length, and then you'll drop it again. Anyway, having done this. Formic acid is also based on that you have a 1/2 inch high, full front entrance open, and the screen board does not count. As a matter of fact, they would like you to slide the screen board in. But already I think you see a problem. There are people who have their robbing screens on. There are people who have their entrance reducers on. Of course, when you've got formic acid coming out of the front of the hive, I really don't think you're going to get robbed by yellow jackets or any other hive. I think you're safe. That stuff stinks so bad. It works. So there are a lot of hives that don't have a 1/2 inch high entrance. I consider it European style to keep the entrance down smaller. There are some that only have a 1/4 inch. Bees only need a 1/4 inch. Why would you give them a 1/2 inch? There's a certain logic to that. Then there's another thing that it says, if the treatment period is going longer than a week, you're supposed to not be opening the hive because you're letting all the gas out and you're losing at least a day probably until it builds back up again and the bees get the ventilation moving and get the formic acid moving through the hive again. So oddly enough, putting a super on because they actually recommend it. That way you don't have to disturb the hive as much. Go ahead and put the super you might need on in a week if the treatment's going to go 2 or 3 weeks. And people argue about resistance. As a biochemist, I can tell you that the formic acid and the oxalic acid, we don't expect the resistance to develop to those. And it has to do with the type of molecule, the size of the molecule, the fact that it doesn't target. For example, some of the most effective ones that you leave in the hive for 40, 50 days, those target, like the nervous system, they target some molecules, specific molecules. And then all of these, this is, actually, I should have put this for all. Just about every miticide you have is supposed to be out of the sunlight, and if you can get it under room temperature, if you have a cool place, not your shed that heats up to 100 degrees in the summer, then they will last longer, especially when you have to open a packet, they're expensive, and you seal it back the best you can. And these two are in all these ways similar until you get to the 2 different dosing options. And both of them still say you can do this or you can do this, and then there should be a month between this set of doses at least before you do the next one, because acids are hard. They're hard on the hive. Let me finish formic, and then maybe Cassie wants to take over and give you the really interesting stuff that everybody came for. If you're late, I'm just doing a little fill while I got everyone's attention. So there's the different dosing strip. I could see how you could run into trouble. Oh, wait a minute. This is wrong. This one is not. Sorry, cut and pasted. I put one of these is right and the other one is wrong. Okay, I was in a hurry. So I think it's this one is this one, and this one I think is 7 and 14, and you can put 2 strips in at a time for 7 or, yeah, I have to go look it up. I will put it correct on the chart, I promise. And the brood mortality and the supersedures of the queens, both young and old. It doesn't make any difference what age your queen is. The instructions just say, well, she was fragile. Well, maybe she wouldn't have been so fragile, but anyway, if you put the wrong amount, if somehow you put in 2 strips when you should have put in 1 and double the dose, it could be too much. So I recommend that where they have an option that's half as much, you put in 1 strip, like this one, whichever one it actually belongs on. I think this is correct. 2 strips for 14 days. Okay, that's a bang dose. But if you were going to put half as much for 10 days, take that one out and then put in the second one for 10 more days. Then you could see how that might save your queen and save your brood. Okay, that's the end of formic, so I better stop and let Cassie take over. And I know you'd love to hear me talk about this bee stuff again. Cassie, are you ready? Do you want to come on in? Cassie is okay, I gotta see your last name right too. I think it's Seahorse. It sounds like Seahorse, right? Oh, you're not, gotta unmute yourself, okay?
How about now? Sorry. It's She-Horse. I think the first time you were right, but okay. She-Horse, Seahorse, same thing. Okay. So again, thank you guys for, did you have more?
No, let me figure out how to stop. Then you can.
I'll take it over. So I'm gonna show you guys I'm going to show you a presentation on Asian giant hornets. I'm gonna actually pause throughout the presentation and give you guys a chance to answer questions, and then also questions at the end. The first half is gonna be like the longest chunk telling you about Asian giant hornet. The second half, I'll tell you what the WSD did, what we're doing, and then the last half, you're all beekeepers, we'll just whiz through it, show you a couple insects you might see out about the same time as Asian giant hornets that aren't Asian giant hornets. So with that being said, you're gonna see your faces really quick for a minute, but let me start it. Okay, so Asian giant hornet, Vespa mandarinia, has other names like yak killer hornet, giant sparrow bee, and then of course you've all heard the infamous murder hornet. New York Times published an article last May that had that title in it. It kind of became sensationalized and people ran with it. Use the term Asian giant hornet when you're Googling, you'll find the best information. What are they? The largest hornet in the world. Adults range between 1.5 inches to 2 inches in length. You can distinguish them by this very prominent large orange yellow head. If you look at the size of the head in comparison to its body, it's about as wide, just as bulky. Then it has those orange yellow bands on their abdomen. They're native to Asia, most observed in areas of subtropical to moderate climate, hence their attempt to establish in the Pacific Northwest. We first discovered them in 2019 when a resident reported a deceased one. Why are they a problem? Specifically in Washington, we identify them to obviously harm honeybees because of their nature, human health if you're stung, in agriculture. I'll detail those as we go. So the first thing I'm going to show you, everyone asks, well, where can Asian giant hornet go? Where can it live? So this is a picture of the United States. As you see areas of bright red and yellow. Then you kind of see areas of blue, purple, or kind of a murky swamp color. This is based off a climatic study. So all it's looking at is strictly like weather patterns. It's not really thinking about other forces that might push things out or like cities and limits like that, just weather patterns. So you see the areas of red and yellow, that's areas where Asian giant hornet could be suitable to live. So you see the Pacific Northwest, and then as you kind of move across the Cascades into the middle part of the United States, not very suitable. Then you get to the east and it's potential again. Basically what this tells us is Asian giant hornets are not likely to spread themselves from the west coast to the east coast on their own. They can't fly that far. They would need to hitchhike. And we know they hitchhike their way here from Asia, so that's always a possibility. I want you to take away 2 things about Asian giant hornets if you don't already know. I want you to take away their nesting habits and their life cycle. That will help you understand trapping and how they danger to bees and are dangerous to humans. So their nests are typically actually going to be below the ground. What they do is they'll take over at the base of a pine tree where roots are rotted out, or sometimes even in old animal or rodent burrows. Sometimes they are recorded in empty tree cavities as well. They won't create like nests that you'll see hanging from a tree, right? They have to have somewhere to build that nest in. These nests will be they can be over 2 feet wide, and they will produce hundreds of adult hornets. So in September 2019, they did eradicate a nest in Nanaimo, British Columbia. So across the water off the mainland side. Since then, they had no other reports of Asian giant hornets. And then obviously we eradicated the one here last October. So this is, I don't know if I told you this, but this is a lone Asian giant hornet hovering near a nest. The second thing, I'm going to talk about this and a little bit about how it applies to you guys, and then I'll pause for questions. But I'm going to spend a minute on this graphic, starting at the top and going in a clockwise position. So in the winter, the males and the workers will actually die. Once the winter hits, they're gone. What happens is the new queens that were produced will actually find a spot to overwinter. So they'll find somewhere sheltered or dig themselves in the soil, kind of overwinter and hibernate. Then as the spring comes, what they'll do is they'll emerge from their sheltering spot, feed themselves on like tree sap and other carbohydrates, and they will find a spot to begin to build that underground nest. Moving later into the spring, into the summer, that's when you'll start to see workers out flying around, foraging, eating other bugs, eating a potential honeybee or 2, bringing it back to feed the nest. Then when we get to the late summer, early fall time, that colony will reach its maturity. So that queen is done laying workers, and now she is going to start laying new virgin queens and males. So we're into this fall time where these new virgin queens and males are being laid. Because of this, they might have a need in their diet for more protein. And one of their favorite sources of protein in their native range are honeybees, and not just individuals, but an entire hive, because of this need for protein, because of the new queens and males, right? So following these new queens and males being laid, they will emerge from the nest. They will mate together really close to the nest. And then the queens will disperse to overwinter, the males and the workers will die, and that cycle will repeat itself. So that founding queen that started that nest will also die, but the new queens that went off to overwinter, if they make it through the winter and successfully mated, they can produce a nest. Not all queens will mate successfully, however. The other hard thing about tracking Asian giant hornets is the dispersal distance of queens is unknown. There's not a lot of literature, not a lot of research saying how far a queen will fly to shelter, and after she overwinters, if she will fly up again. So that's, just kind of what makes it a little difficult in predicting where they're going to go. So that fall time, right? What interests you guys is how your bees could be susceptible. Remind you, they've only been found in Whatcom County, but this is what happens. If they decide they want this protein source, first off, Asian giant hornets kind of start hunting around the hive, picking off an adult honeybee, mashing it up into a bee ball, taking it back to feed their young. They decide they want it, they'll return to the hive and mark it with a pheromone, which will signal the other hornets to come here. From that, they will then enter the hive, grab all the adult honeybees and decapitate them, drop their bodies to the ground. That's what we heard called the infamous slaughter phase, right? Once the adult honeybees are taken care of, then they will start to occupy the hive, taking the brood and the pupae back to feed their own colony. And they're going to occupy this hive and defend it as their own until either there's no more food left, they don't eat it, or it's no longer viable. In their native range, 1 to 20 Asian giant hornets can decimate a hive anywhere between 1 to 6 hours, but on average, it takes about 90 minutes. So as beekeepers in Washington, I do have this resource for you, especially in that fall time. You want to have this phone number, 360-902-1880. And what this is it's an emergency hive attack hotline, right? We turn it on as these fall months come closer, and we monitor it 24/7. If you suspect a hive attack or you see an Asian giant hornet at your hive, you want to call us immediately and we'll come out. Now, I'll give you a different number at the end for you to report anytime you think you see one that's not, damaging your honeybees, not in that fall time, but we'll talk about it later. So 2 more slides before I pause. So then people ask me, well, how do Asian giant hornets live over in their native range with honeybees there? And why don't we bring those honeybees here? Well, a couple different things, as you know. We have European honeybees. Over there, they have Japanese honeybees. Their honeybees do have a defense mechanism against the Asian giant hornet. If the Asian giant hornet attempts to enter the hive, they will actually swarm that hornet, creating a bee ball around it, buzzing and warming their body temperatures up just enough to essentially cook that hornet alive, and it'll die. In doing this, they might lose up to 30% of their colony, but they're protecting themselves from decimation. So that's pretty cool. Our honeybees don't do that, right? So we don't want to bring those honeybees over here because they're not the same species. So we don't know if they would even be able to hybridize, or if they would likely to be able to hybridize. They're not good producers of honey, especially compared to our honeybees. And then, as we were talking about at the beginning of this, mites. They have a mite over there called Tropolelaps, and it just makes our mite problem look like there's no problem at all. So we don't want to bring those bees over there, bees here, because we will bring those mites as well. So the last thing I'll do before I pause is point out that in the past, Asian giant hornets served a good source of protein. People would eat the adult Asian giant hornets, they would eat the pupae and the larvae. Now this is equated over time to them actually being a sort of a delicacy, about $31 a pound. They also they'll put the Asian giant hornet in an energy drink as a novelty, or like how we know people do the tequila and the worm, they'll do the hornet and the alcohol. So with that being said, I am going to stop sharing and I'll go back on here. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat box or just unmute yourself and ask. And then if there's no questions, I'll just return back to my slides.
Casey, I was wondering as you talked there, if it would be at all effective to use mechanical barriers, sort of like a mouse guard, to keep them out of your hive.
So since I work for the state, I can't give recommendations. Like an excluder would be a recommendation because I can't be liable for your bees' safety. But Washington State University Extension will give you those recommendations. They do have them. They have them at the Island County, and I can throw those in there, throw that in the chat box for you, the link to there. But just remember, they're still only in Whatcom County. In their native range, they do try to use excluders. Sometimes those just don't work. Sometimes it literally comes to be that fall time and they have someone standing outside the hive with a racket just whacking adult Asian giant hornets. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna jump back in. Slideshow, flip current slide. Okay. So basically, you already know this. We ask people to report Asian giant hornets, and we ask people to help us trap for Asian giant hornets. It all started back in December, but then it kind of blew up with the madness of May. So where have Asian giant hornets been confirmed? This is a map of the state of Washington, and these are reports we get from our online reporting forum. So any orange dot you see is an unconfirmed sighting, meaning it was confirmed not to be an Asian giant hornet, or they didn't submit a photo, so we can't confirm it. All the red circles you see are confirmed sightings of Asian giant hornets, and any of the diamonds you see are where we actually trapped them. So as you can see in the zoomed up picture, that is the area of Blaine towards the top and Bellingham towards the bottom. So it's just the northwest corner of Whatcom County. Last year, we had 31 sightings. However, across the border, between 2019 and 2020, they actually had 6. And that goes all the way from the White Rock area, which is northwest of Blaine, all the way over to Aldergrove, which is, if you know, it's above the Linden area. I don't know, maybe a 15-20 minute drive at the most to go from the west to the east side. So what do we do once we have one of these confirmed sightings, and how does that lead us into trapping? What we do is we take one of those red dots or confirmed sighting, take one of the purple circles on the right grid, and imagine the very center of it. That's where an Asian giant hornet was detected. From that, we go out in every direction, a total of 8 kilometers, which is about 5 miles. That's the distance that an Asian giant hornet worker is likely to forage. By nature, they go out and eat, they bring it back to their nest. That's how we create where we're trapping. We just overlay a grid to make sure that each one of those squares, or how many of our traps we put in those squares, are present in the right areas. So then last May, an Asian giant hornet queen was found in the Bellingham area, deceased. So we trapped in that area as well. Last year, we placed over 950 traps in these areas. However, we know it's not just us trapping. We reached out to citizens in Washington, much like yourself, and we said, if you can help prevent the spread and you have some time and the available resources, please help us trap. And the public responded immensely. Over 1,550 traps went up with my cooperators and citizen scientists. So if you guys did that, that's awesome. Thank you. If you're interested in doing it this year, we'll be offering it again. Most beekeepers tell me they enjoy them because they tend to trap yellow jackets. So what these traps are is the bottom left picture, you see the clear plastic bottle. Inside that is a mixture of orange juice and rice cooking wine. The idea is the hornet flying by, if it smells the scent of that bait, it's attracted into the trap, flies in, drowns in the cooking wine mixture, and dies, right? And then we have an Asian giant hornet. But that Asian giant hornet is dead, and we want to capture a live one. Because you remember, if you think back to the life cycle, if we're able to remove that nest before the new queens and the males can go off to mate, we're removing an entire population, as well as moving forward. So once we capture a dead Asian giant hornet in one of our traps, we deploy a ton of traps around it that are essentially modified or live traps. Same idea, the hornet will fly in and get stuck, but it won't be able to drown in the mixture and die. We have one of these live babies because we are going to actually use that to track it back to its nest. We did have a couple failures the first time we tried to track Asian giant hornets, but eventually we were successful. We attached the tracker to the hornet, let it warm up, let it eat a little bit, and then it'll fly off. We actually use the process of telemetry to track it. So it essentially looks like we're walking around the forest with an old cable TV antenna. If you're pointing in the right direction of the hornet, you'll hear a click or a feedback. As you get closer, that will become stronger. And then, as you all know, we found one nest in the area of Blaine last year. We do suspect that there was still maybe 2 to 3 or more nests out there because we were catching Asian giant hornets in the areas of Birch Bay and kind of more towards Custer, but no nests were ever found. Once we find that nest, we want to remove it. We're going to remove any hornets that are present, go back and make sure we've got them all, and then obviously examine the nest, just show you a couple of pictures of what it looked like. When we did open the Asian giant hornet nest, there was adult Asian giant hornets present. So we removed those and sent them off for research. Just a couple of facts and figures, you can see what we found from it. I just like to show you this picture because if you look at the bottom left, that's one of the cells or one of the combs that the Asian giant hornets hatch from. When an Asian giant hornet hatches, is its full adult size. There's no such thing as a baby Asian giant hornet. They will always be between that 1.5 to 2 inches in length. So real quick, a couple other things we found. We made everybody return all their trap contents as well as we examined ours. And we found this tiny parasitic wasp that kills this other bug that damages fruit crops. So that's cool. It might be a potential ally to managing that other harmful bug. The other thing that we did that might be more interesting to Asian giant hornets is we actually sequenced their genes. And in insects, you use their CO1 gene. And in Asian giant hornets, this gene is maternally inherited from the founding queen. So we processed all the hornets in Washington, and they were said to have identical CO1 genes, meaning it suggests they came from the same introduction. We also analyzed one of the hornets that came from the Nanaimo eradication. That hornet showed different CO1 genes or different barcodes. So that suggests that the Nanaimo introduction and the Washington introductions come from different populations or different introductions. Moving forward, obviously, if you see an Asian giant hornet, report it. We will be running the citizen scientist trapping program that will start in July. All the details on that are on our website. So where are we trapping this year? This is what our trapping grid looks like this year. As you can see, we mapped all of those 31 detections out. We are going out all the 8 miles and we're placing traps there. The reason it goes all the way southwest east is because there was a detection across the border in Canada that far east. So there's where we'll be trapping. Really quick before I pause again, I mentioned that Asian giant hornets are a threat to human health. So I talked about if they are raiding that hive, they're going to defend it as their own when they're eating the honeybees. If a beekeeper comes upon the Asian giant hornets raiding a hive, they're going to protect it. So this is a chance where they might sting the beekeeper, and traditional beekeeping attire will not keep you safe from the sting of an Asian giant hornet. Same thing if you come upon a nest, they're going to feel threatened and might sting. Since they're a hornet, they have the largest hornet in the world. They have a very large stinger that's capable of delivering a lot of venom, more than we're used to of our native insects. They can sting multiple times and it can damage the skin surrounding that sting site. So really quick, if you're stung once, ice, antihistamine, aspirin, clean that site. If you are allergic, you might have a reaction, so epinephrine, call 911. However, if you're stung multiple times, it does become more serious. So you're going to do the same things, but then you need to seek a healthcare provider. So I'm going to stop sharing there, maybe. And go ahead, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Bug assault guns would get those Asian giant hornets. Yeah. They do hit them. In their native range, sometimes they just use rackets and whack them out of the air. But I just wouldn't want to make one too mad.
Hi, Cassie. My name's Corinne. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that tiny parasitic wasp is new to the area? Because we have a huge SWD problem, as you know.
Yeah, it was actually the first time it was detected in the United States, in the state of Washington. So it could be very potential in helping aid spotted winged Drosophila.
That is a wonderful find.
Yep. All right. Tough crowd. Okay, I'm going to go back. And then obviously I'll answer any questions at the end. Slideshow from current slide. Okay, so I'm just going to show you side-by-side comparisons. A lot of, as beekeepers, y'all know what a yellow jacket and a honeybee looks like, but I'll just run through them really fast. So this is honestly, if you compared side-by-side, what our honeybees and Asian giant hornet size difference are. Same thing with our bumblebees, small, black, yellow, and fuzzy. Tell all your friends, especially this time of year, you know, queens are out, so people are seeing them and they're killing them thinking they're Asian giant hornets. So tell all your friends, if it's hairy, it's not a hornet. You all know what bald-faced hornets are, 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch, found throughout North America, a little bit bigger than yellow jackets, pretty much all black with white markings. Another one that gets reported are great golden digger wasps. They're about 1 inch long and they do have a very narrow and long wasp waist. If you look at their body, it does tend to be kind of dark brown to black like the Asian giant hornet, but look at the legs on it are orange. Asian giant hornets aren't. The most distinguishing feature here is that abdomen, because it has that black solid tip and then that orange red. So it's missing that banding that you can see on the Asian giant hornet. Cicada killers, these can get up to 2 inches long. However, if you look at the thorax, their thorax tends to be more reddish in color, unlike the black of the Asian giant hornet. You can't see in this picture, but they have very round eyes and Asian giant hornets do not. Does anyone remember what I said was the most distinguishing feature about an Asian giant hornet? I mean, maybe other than their size. It's that head. If you look at the size comparison of the head of those cicada killers, they're just not the size, the width of their body. So that's going to be the thing that's going to distinguish them the most. People call them these horntail wasps. They look at them and they think that is a huge stinger, so it has to be an Asian giant hornet. You can see in the pictures, definitely different. It's not a stinger, and this is how it gets its nickname as a wood wasp. You might have heard it because that's actually an egg-laying tube, and they use that to lay their eggs in wood. Your favorites right here, you know, those beautiful, lovely yellow jackets that get about a ½ an inch long unless they're the queen and they're pretty brightly marked. Okay. Elm sawflies do get called in a lot because if their wingspan is pretty long, so sometimes when they're out flying around, they can look a lot bigger. They can also be really noisy. Down throughout North America, 3/4 to an inch long. They're missing that wasp waist. Instead, it's kind of that white or yellow spot on its thorax. Fun fact, this is the largest sawfly on the continent. And last one I have for you are paper wasps. Throughout North America, you know, 3/4 of an inch long. They have that really distinct wasp waist. So if you think, or you're not sure if you've seen an Asian giant hornet, the best thing you can do is report it. I want to know when you saw it, where you saw it, anything you noticed about it, what it looked like or what it was doing. If you can safely obtain a photo, that's even better. I cannot confirm or deny it to be an Asian giant hornet without seeing it. If it's already dead, go ahead and collect it in case we want to test it later or it is an Asian giant hornet. And where do you report? We have an online reporting form on our website, agr.wa.gov/hornets, which also has all our resources. You can shoot an email to hornets@agr.wa.gov. We're really good at responding to that quickly, and you'll pretty quickly get an insect ID back. And then you can call our hotline. Okay, so that's kind of it. The other thing I want to share with you is how to sign up for stakeholder updates. I sent one out today, but I send them out pretty much monthly, bi-weekly if it's really busy. It's just a PDF that comes to your email, and it has everything listed that's going on in the Asian giant hornet world, just to give you a quick email update. You can do that. You just go to the website, agr.wa.gov/hornets. Stay on that main page, and all you do is scroll down. And then in big black letters, you'll see the section that says stay informed. In the first link, it says click this to join the listserv. You click on it, it takes you to this other page. You don't even have to put in your name, but obviously if you want me to send an email, I need your email address, and then subscribe. Make sure the Asian giant hornet box is clicked. So that's kind of it that I have for you. The other thing we have is a Facebook group, and that is ran and monitored by us. There's almost 7,000 people in it though, so people do talk and connect with each other, babble about the Asian giant hornet world. The last thing is we created a video at the end of the year, just recapping everything we did, kind of behind the scenes look. You get interviews from everybody that worked on the project. Last thing at the bottom is my email. Feel free to send me an email at any time. Typically only respond between the hours of 7 a.m. and 3 p.m., but I will definitely hit you back. And with that being said, get all your questions brewing because I am going to answer them all. Maybe. Okay.
Cassie, did you ever eat one?
Okay, I was just going to ask you guys, would you rather? Okay, so think about Asian giant hornets. Would you rather eat the larvae of an Asian giant hornet, or would you rather get stung by an Asian giant hornet?
Oh. You'd eat one.
Eat the larvae.
Eat it.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right,
I agree. Definitely rather eat the larvae than get stung.
It's very rarely I have people pick stung. Usually it's men that don't like slimy food. Is their explanation. But yeah. No, when we did open the nest up, we were all kind of joking that we'd like to try it, but research it goes, you know?
Did you find any in the ground, or were they in the trees?
So when we got to where we thought the nest was, we expected it to be in the ground. We practiced for it being in the ground. You could hear them flying overhead. You could kind of see them, but it wasn't until we actually saw them coming in and leaving out of the tree cavity that we determined, oh crap, it's probably in the tree. The other thing we have with us is a flare device, which if you point it at something, it tells you the heat temperature. So one of the things we did when we found that tree is we were looking at the tree and pointing at it to see if the heat went into the ground and maybe the tree was the entrance. and then they dug down because they do dig and will dig and can dig. So it ended up being in a tree cavity. That's actually supposed to be very rare. I don't know if that's how it's going to be here in Washington, if that's their typical thing because they're outside of their native range, or if it just happened to be a one-time deal.
Okay. So, if they're in the ground, I thought I saw that picture. Is it kind of open, or do they cover it, or?
So they create one entrance into their nest. Unless that gets blocked somehow, then they'll create a new entrance. If you come upon if anyone were to come upon a nest, they would typically swarm you to protect their nest, but you'll usually be able to see them or hear them because they will be coming and going from the nest pretty much at all hours of the day. They're kind of less immobile at night, but they still will be out foraging. And when I say hundreds of hornets, I literally mean hundreds of hornets.
And they must be pretty loud then, right?
They're kind of clumsy. I think it's just they're so large, and I honestly think queen bumblebees create more of a sound. You hear them more. They kind of like when they fly by, you kind of hear them, but it's more like a hover in the air.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have to ask, who's gonna do the traps this year? Pat, didn't you do one last year? That's Pat paying attention. I think she took.
The right answer is all of you.
I did the homemade traps and I didn't get anything, so I bought Home Depot traps this year. Sorry.
The thing you want to watch out with buying the traps, like the yellow jacket traps or other traps, is the opening to it might just not be big enough. Like it has to kind of be 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters wide for them to actually be able to fit in it.
Has anybody seen a queen this year at all? Or do you think that was just a fluke, or with the genetic variation, do you think there's still more out there?
There's definitely still more out there. I mean, since they are all coming from probably the same introduction, and the one queen creates the nest, there might be some type of bottleneck effect that that we hope will help us, but there's really no research or rhyme or reason saying that will actually be the case. Yeah, we think that there's going to be some out there, but if no one ever catches any, that'll be just great. Last year, that's what I was talking about, was the queens. The first one we found was in May. The second one we found was in June, and those were all like citizens saw them deceased and reported them. The third one we did catch in a trap, but she was unmated. So that was closer to July. It might be still kind of early based on when we saw them last year. They also don't spend a lot of time out and about. They kind of eat and start their nests. If you do place traps, honestly, just place it somewhere that's accessible to you. If you place them near a hive, you want to keep them 50 feet away from the hive or the apiary. Basically, just find a tree branch you can reach and hang it up there. We say 6 to 9 feet up high, but as long as, if it's hanging in a tree and if a breeze comes along and that scent of the bait might carry, that's more than perfect. The other thing is like, the hornets won't come from like miles to be attracted to that trap. If the trap happens to be in the area that the hornet's in, that's when they'll be attracted to it. Because I know I get people that are kind of scared or worried to trap, and there is danger if a hornet's around, you might get stung, but they won't seek your trap out from miles and miles away. They just might smell it if they're in the area.
How many are typically in a nest from your experience?
We counted out, I think original numbers were 98, but I think after that, a little bit over 100 workers, 100 queens, and 9 males.
So they're not like a normal honey. They're not like a honeybee. Then they got a lot of queens.
Yep, the one queen will produce like hundreds of queens that will move forward to or attempt to move forward to the next year, but not all of them will mate, and not all of them will make it through the winter.
Not very lovable bees.
Oh. Where do they go and overwinter, the queens? I mean,
they literally find somewhere sheltered. So typically they like kind of dig themselves into the soil or into the dirt somewhere. But if they find somewhere else that's really cool, they'll do that as well. If anyone wants to join the mail list where I send out those emails and you forgot how to do it, you can shoot me an email, but it's just going to be on the main webpage and I'll put that in the chat box.
How far do they range?
They'll fly up to about 5 miles. The range of them is unknown in Washington. In their native range, Japan and Korea, they're most observed, but they're kind of just everywhere as long as it's kind of subtropic to moderate. So like not super alpine-y. They've seen them up there, but the weather patterns aren't, tended to be right. And the same thing with like super swampy, marshy. People usually ask me about the winters too. Well, since we had a bad winter here, will we have less queens? And that's also a fluke because over there in their native range, they have some pretty harsh, nasty winters and they make them through it.
So you're doing this for Washington State? Are there other states doing the work that you're doing, like on the East Coast?
No, they've only been found in Washington, so we're only trapping in Washington. Obviously, British Columbia.
Yep.
Oh, I should have showed you the map. They do trap over there on their side, but I think they spread their traps out a little bit further. They don't have the funding to have the human resources like we do working on the ground. So they kind of rely a little bit heavier on public submissions, just like we do. Out of those 31 detections, half were just submitted from the public where people saw them or people killed them and picked them up.
Mm-hmm. How many people are on your team, Cassie?
I'm like the only actual one that's devoted to it full time, but then my boss Sven, our entomologist Chris, a trapper Jenny, and our eradication coordinator Ryan. So 5 of us. Yeah.
You're amazing.
And then we do hire like seasonal trappers, but they're just here during the trapping season to run the traps.
Is the expectation that we will eradicate them or that we're going to have to learn to live with them and our bees will have to adapt?
We want to we want to eradicate them. Honestly, if we saw nothing at all this year, that would be great. To consider a species introduced or establishing, they have to be seen over multiple years. The same thing with to consider them eradicated, you don't have to see it for multiple years. But we had one successful eradication. Now that we know how to track them and find them, we're super hopeful that we'll be able to get them all out of here. We don't want them to establish.
Do you have a design for the trap on your website?
Yep.
Because
basically all you do is you just grab, okay, so if you go to that main website, there's tabs at the top. You want to click on the one that says trapping to look at the pictures. It's like literally a 2-liter or 64-ounce clear plastic bottle, soda bottle, juice bottle, and then you cut 3 openings in the side, hang it from a tree. So.
Okay.
There's a question, just curious about my life. Thanks for taking interest in me. How I came about this job. I actually went to school at UNL, Nebraska Lincoln in the Midwest. We did learn about Asian giant hornet for like 15 minutes in a class, but I moved up here to be closer to family. I saw the job posting and I always worked in agriculture and had really weird jobs and I thought it'd be just as cool. I also used to teach kindergarten through 2nd grade, so kind of combining agriculture and teaching makes me good for this.
I wonder if we could get a Halloween. What if we get a Halloween costume called the Killer Hornet costume? What do you think?
So those white suits, the space suits that you saw us wear? We got ours off Amazon, and you guys can buy yours off Amazon too. They're a couple $100s, and the prices went up a little bit after the eradication, but there you go. Just blow up a white trash bag and put it on yourself.
So you're saying my little flimsy beehive suit probably wouldn't handle a sting from a hornet?
Yeah, their stingers are long enough to go through it. Those suits that we wear, they're like probably a half. I wouldn't say as much of a ½ inch thick, but it's a bunch of different woven mesh layers together. So I think if the stinger tried to penetrate it, it would get caught in those layers. they're all one piece. So the gloves and the boots are connected, as well as that thing that zips over your head across the front, because it's like a mesh opening for your face, but there is a clear plastic shield you attach to that, because the hornets, they're capable of chewing and biting, but they can also secrete a venom, like they secrete their pheromones, and if it gets into your eyes, it could be damaging. Would have to be like up on your face screen, I think, to make it in there. They have little cool fans in the top tool to keep you cool if you're really interested, battery operated.
So aside from seeing a dead out hive, or actual Asian giant hornet, is there any other way to detect them in your environment?
Well, the traps, you know, I said if they're by a trap, they'll go into it. Other than that, it's just like right now, queens are attracted to tree sap, but the sap at the time that comes out of the trees in Washington isn't as good for them. So last year we had tried what they do over there called sap traps. So you kind of harm a part in your tree to where the sap starts secreting, and you put a sticky trap over that, and the queen's supposed to stick to it. It wasn't very promising, so we're trying different queen traps right now, but the densities of them are so low that you're more likely to find a deceased one than you actually will see a live one. But yeah, it's just reporting, taking pictures of any bug you see, sending it to me.
I got my first bee sting on Monday. My first honeybee sting, by the way, if everybody would like to know that. I got stung 3 times.
No.
Didn't I, Eli?
Yeah, I don't know if that counts, though, you know. It was only on the ankle.
3 stings. That's my first time I've ever been stung by a honeybee.
Wow.
Yeah. I got my ankle swelled up pretty good too, by the way, Eli.
3 of them? Yeah, I imagine you got 3.
3 of them got me. Anyway, I think the bee suit, you got to tighten it at the ankles too, right, Eli?
Or overlap it somehow. Thicker socks too, something like that. I have a question about the bait. Did they change the bait for the AGH from orange juice and cooking wine?
So there is an optional trap that they're telling people that we can use this year. It's dark brown sugar and water. With using that too, you only have to check it every 2 weeks. Basically, they did a survey for European hornets in Pennsylvania, which are the same, come from the same family as Asian giant hornets. And they were successful in capturing like 928 European hornets. And also, like, for some reason, as you guys probably know this as beekeepers, honeybees aren't really attracted to dark brown sugar, but like other species of hornets are.
Actually, I didn't know that. I knew they didn't go to fermented things as much. So you put fermentation or alcohol or something in the traps, and that doesn't get your honeybee. But no, I didn't know that about dark brown sugar.
So Cassie, I signed up on that website. Are you going to send like the directions on how to make those traps? I'm looking all over here. I don't see it. So it's not there yet, like this year's traps.
Cassie, we can't hear you.
Here, the direct link for the trapping is in there. You just have to make sure you hit the trapping link at the top. Sometimes it looks weird on the phone, and if you still can't find them, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you.
Thank you. I got it. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
There's a question in the chat about pollinating. They're an apex predator, so they like literally only eat other insects. They eat usually typically large beetles and other insects throughout their entire life. Queens are the only ones that really feed on non-insects. They do eat like carbohydrates throughout their lifetime. They'll chew on unripened fruit and stuff like that, but their typical food attire, they're an apex predator, is other insects.
Cassie, what kind of sap are they attracted to? And yeah, a lot of like yellow jackets. We worry about yellow jackets which I forget if they're truly a hornet. I think they are truly. Oh, people are always telling me there's a difference between hornets and wasps, and I can't tell the difference. But yellow is what we call them. And when the queen emerges, she'll try to sneak into beehives to snack on the nectar. So would Asian giant hornets come in for that purpose, or they would only go for sap?
I've just been told they're typically just attracted to sap. Anything that I've read in their native range, they're typically just attracted to the sap. But maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I've always been told and always read.
And Cassie, you mentioned about the Asian honeybee can't breed with ours. I get asked that actually seriously. Well, if the Asian honeybee is the one that gave us the Varroa mite, very close relative, and the mutation jumped to honeybees, and then the Asian honeybee gave us the new form of Nosema, and going on and on.
I mean, it's not saying that it's not saying that they won't mate and that they won't hybridize. It's just they've never. They don't live together, so it's not likely for them to, and we don't know if they were introduced that they would. The mite problem seems to uphold and stem that, especially because we're going to eradicate them, so you beekeepers don't have to worry. Also, I did do a quick Google, and it said that Asian giant hornet queens will occasionally eat honey from the honeybee colonies. So that also answers your other question.
It would just seem logical because you could smell a honeybee. If we can smell it on a warm, sunny day, even like nowadays, from a ways away, boy, I bet they're just attracted by that smell of the hive. Yeah. Yeah, and I know that the Asian honeybee and the European honeybee can't breed together. They're completely different species. Then they're kept side by side in Asia. So I put a bunch of links in the chat box. I told you all that I sent out a stakeholder update today. So if you weren't signed up, you didn't get it to your email. So I put the link in the chat box to read that latest stakeholder update if you haven't seen it. Which basically everything I just talked to you guys about is you're knowledgeable now. But you're so much better, Cassie, you're so much better. And I did take the PDF and put it in files on our Facebook group discussion page. Are there more questions? This is fun. But we should let Cassie go at some time.
Hey, Cassie, did you talk to the Puget Sound Beekeepers Association?
Yeah, I have.
You did?
I think I've met with pretty much everyone kind of in the area at least once. Also with that, moving forward with you guys as the season progresses, I'd like to hop on for 15 minutes and give you a quick update on what we found and where we're at.
That would be great. I think everybody would like that.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Because this has been fun. And I have a picture of the hornets in the drinks too. I should show that. Maybe I'll let Cassie go first because she's not supposed to recommend recipes and such, And then I like to show that picture of the stir-fried hornets on the skewer. It's brooklynbugs.com. You get really neat pictures. Not that we're recommending that, right? And I noticed that there's some legislation somewhere was just introduced to keep people to make it illegal to bring hornets alive into the United States, I think. I think nobody ever made it illegal.
Nobody is illegal. Basically, if you find a live Asian giant hornet in Washington, you're not allowed to take it to another state.
Okay, that's it. No crossing the state borders.
Yep. That kind of brings you to a lot of people asked how they got over here. And, typically it's with some type of freight or shipment. But there's also the possibility that, they're a delicacy there. They were brought over here to be a delicacy and something bad happened. That's also another possibility. Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm leaving you. You have my email and my phone number. Feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. Yeah, but I hope you all have a nice evening. And you talk about some bee stuff that is above my head, and hope all your bees made it through the winter.
Okay, round of applause.
Yay.
That was sweet of her. Okay, I think I published that we're going to end the meeting at 8. I guess we usually end it at 8:30. I can talk on and on about Varroa. If you came early enough, some of you came later. I'm updating the treatment chart, trying to make some sense out of the different Varroa treatments and why one person says, boy, this Formic Pro really works. And this other person says, it's like giving them water. It didn't do anything. And I think it's the complexity of the instructions. I really do. If you get 1 or 2 Varroicides that really work for you. So I can go back to talking about, except you have to see the Asian giant hornet drinks, okay? Okay, I have to do this. I think it's this, which one? This one. Okay. I have to, sorry, we have to look at this since I carefully found my favorite slides. Here we go.
Oh, God.
She said something about soft drinks. I assumed this was alcohol. Well, apparently they release their venom in and it gives this little zing. And so you
I wonder if they're really crunchy.
I didn't find my stir fry skewer one. This is how this is a different type of Asian hornet here, obviously, right? We're all experts identifying it. And we now know this is a different Asian hornet. Well, there have been some articles recently that have sort of hit the news. Heather Matilla does lots of serious research, and this is a serious research article. And in this serious research article, they are looking at how the bees, see these little splats here? The bees have been going around picking up manure, dung, and putting it around the entrance of their hive to discourage some of these Asian hornets. And there are lots of species of Asian hornets. There are lots and lots of them. So you have to be careful and say Asian giant hornet. And I forgot to ask about the Pennsylvania European hornets. They got how many? What's that doing in here? Unless that's the European yellow jacket. We have a German yellow jacket and we have a more native yellow jacket. Unless that's what she meant. But anyway,
Eli?
Yeah, this is really exciting though. I mean, slinging dung around. Yes?
Eli?
Yes, Steve.
Does everybody that's new to beekeeping have yellow jacket jacket traps, etc. in this area? Is that pretty much a given, or are they that big a problem? Yellow jackets I'm talking about.
Okay. Was it 2 summers ago or last summer? Boy, I'm getting old. There was one summer they were terrible. I think it was 2 summers ago. They were absolutely horrible. It's kind of cyclical for a lot of insects, and they were people who'd never seen them. I had seldom seen them, and they started hanging around my hives. So I've never bothered to before that. Now I have a maid. I've got to get them out. I know that.
Okay, so I should buy some traps.
Or you just make them, like they're saying. You cut the holes in the pop bottle and you hang them up. I didn't get the pictures in here because I didn't have time.
Do we have time to go through like a quick little share of who got bees through the winter and whatnot? I got 2 hives through the winter, but I treated heavily in December, which I took off 1,000 mites, 1,000 mites during the entire course of December, just treating. And both of them came through this winter, but my Italians act up all the time. They like to swarm, they like to hang out underneath the hive and on top of the hive. And so I restacked the boxes and fed them all and settled them all down. And I'd like to hear what other people have done if we have the time to just hear what people have done to get their hives through the winter and what they're doing right now.
Well, why are they hanging underneath? Like
you can ask them. There's nothing under there. I switched the bottom boards, screen bottom boards. I've switched them out. They're Italian bees and that's what they want to do. They're not doing it since I fed them. And I think there was just a lot of brood pattern and they didn't have anything to do. The new they came out, did orientation flights and just hung out. And who knows? I call them my bad child, the child you have in your family that you know is going to cause problems. Those are my Italian bees. But they're doing well now. And since I restacked the boxes and I threw some feed on them, but they made it through the winter, which is amazing. And they have brood and they have larvae and I have eggs and they look really nice. But I'm curious to hear what other people did this winter, how other people made it through the winter.
How did you treat them in December when it was so cold?
You know, I did a mite test in August and I had a low mite count. And in December, I did a oxalic acid vaporizer test. And I thought I would have nothing show up because I had a low mite count in August and September. So I just did a quick check in late November and I had a 300 mite drop off. Yeah. So then I did every week until I got down to having maybe 30 mite drop off. And I'm not going to treat them in January and February, obviously. So I left it at that point. And but it was amazing to me to get 1,000 mites off of each hive in December. And I think that's why they survived the winter because there was no brood at that. You know, they had whatever they had, but they were not active. It was incredible to me. I thought I had it made. I thought that was just going to be a quick test and I would have no fallout, but you know, they're little tramps and they're flying around and hanging out with other bees and getting mites. So
yeah, last year was the year of the mite bomb. How many people got mite bombed after they did the alcohol washes, which I really did more than I usually do. I stuck with it. I did them and nothing showed up, you know, one or two. And nothing showed up, kept going. And then suddenly it hit, yes. And I was treating in December too with the oxalic acid. And it was massive drops. And I didn't think they'd make it through the winter, but they did. So I know it was too little too late. Everybody who knows about mite population, you're supposed to take care of this in late August by the latest, because the bees that live for 5 months, maybe during the winter, they have to live until the spring and raise the first brood. They're supposed to, if they get fed on by mites as larvae and as young adults, they're not going to be that healthy. Somehow I did what Corinne did too. I ended up, but I checked and checked, the same thing, and they didn't show up. And I don't know why, except maybe everybody else's hive collapsed. The foragers all went out and hit us. So Corinne got about half of them and I got the other half. We're miles away, so we must have been, you know.
So Eli, did you do the alcohol wash then in December?
No, in December I didn't. I found out I was high in like October. I knew I was high, but I hadn't been high like in early September. So if I hadn't checked later, I never would have known.
No, I felt like I couldn't check in December. So I just did this little prophylactic boost and found out such a high mite count. And I think that between August, I had fewer than 3 mites in a wash. Yeah. I do my washes regularly. I'm really attentive to that. And I think they just brought them in that late fall. You know, really our fall comes pretty late. And thankfully, you know, I just was able to go out there every week and do a vaporizer treatment, which wasn't that difficult for the system I use.
Yeah. I don't usually do the vaporizing every so many days, but I did it, kept getting more and more. I was getting really worried. And even when I stopped doing it, they were still falling. So actually I went ahead and did formic acid already, knowing that it's just getting up to 60 degrees where I am last week.
It is amazing though, don't you think, when you open them up after 6 months of being closed and they're still working and they're still vigorous and you have, you know, they're building comb and it is really very exciting to watch. This has been a very good experience. This is my first winter over.
Okay. How many did you have to have 2 tries at it?
No, this is my first.
Okay, great. You made it to the first winner?
Well, I spend a lot of time on education and
Right. Nobody else got mite bombed late last year.
Yeah, I think I did because I lost both of my hives.
But yours were funny. Just the queen shut down. They wouldn't pull out the wax. They wouldn't go up into the second box. We couldn't
Yeah.
figure that out. There was something wrong. And it was so late in the season. It was too late to make a decision on what to do with when you got one hive. Well, you had 2, but one of them was always weaker and the one was stronger. That didn't make sense, except for combining. That's the only thing I thought we could do differently. Because you didn't have 2 deeps worth, which is safety. That gives you insurance.
Right. Yeah.
I have to ask Pat, did the bees swarm yet?
Not yet.
Okay, you might have fooled them enough. We went in and Pat doesn't want more hives. So the way I'd explain it is we just shook them up kind of. We took out a bunch of queen cells, which I tell you, when I talk about swarms, that's what I always say, you can't destroy all the queen cells. And if they decide to swarm, it's probably not going to work. The older queen is probably going to take off. You'll probably have missed at least 1 swarm cell. But we did go through it frame by frame, that entire, what you call your South Tribe hive. And you still found more, right? When you went back?
We had at least 10 more today we took out.
So they're determined.
So are these queen cells, or are they at the bottom where you would consider them swarm cells?
Yeah, swarm cells at the bottom.
Oh my goodness. Where are you located?
In Marysville, up above the golf course on the hill.
Wow.
But there's a but to it. Pat has the most incredible location and got honey her first year.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, lots of it. 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Hey, Eli.
Wind protection, forage, she has it all going for her. And so they're zooming again this year. They're doing the same thing where they're going to zoom off. As a matter of fact, you had swarm cells in the middle of the frames at the top of your hive. They were so swarm crazy. So if you can keep them in there, more luck to you.
Well, today I put in 5 new empty frames, took out a bunch for each tribe, each hive. So we'll see.
Hey, Eli, typically, if a bee swarm, how much of the hive do they take, the queen?
1/2.
A half is the rule, and it can be 75%, the first one.
Really? So you don't want them to swarm, bottom line.
If they swarm too close to your honey flow, there aren't going to be enough workers to give you any surplus honey. If they do it really, really early, like if they had already done it, it wouldn't be so bad because it'd be time to rebuild. Except your neighbors might not be happy if 50,000. Well, I guess 30,000 bees land in there.
So Pat, how many hives did you have winter over?
2, just 2 hives.
And they wow, that's incredible. I'm just down the road at Everett, but my hives are kind of in the shade, and I think they suffer from that. Although it makes it better for me because they're not getting that morning sun to want to wake up and go swarm. And
These guys did a practice run. They did a little clump over in my neighbor's apple tree, and that's when I called Eli. I said help, but they went back to their hive. So we may have stopped it. I don't know for how long. We'll see.
Does anyone need help this weekend? Because so far nobody's asked me, and I think I'm free after I finish teaching apprentice. So, but it's going to rain this weekend, so it's probably just installs for whatever you're doing. It's no fun to go in when the bees are grouchy, unless you have to. You have to. You got swarm cells. But just in case, nobody's asked me. I promise to help. Steve, I'm meeting you tomorrow morning. Did you pick up the nuke? The nukes?
No, I was going to call you.
I can't hear you. I'll mute me. Okay.
Hold on. I'm going to go Monday, Tuesday, pick up.
Okay, I scared him off.
I think his internet was bad.
Wait, but there we are. Might be coming back. Let me see.
Back?
You're back.
Monday or Tuesday, Hallsborough. I couldn't do it today.
Okay, so after your trip.
Right. We'll go fishing some walleye here tomorrow.
Okay, your audio is still bad, but I think that you're going fishing tomorrow, and you're going to do it like Monday or Tuesday. Go pick them up. Okay. So if anybody did need help or anything, or would like to have somebody come over, I was going to try to get the hive inspections going, and then I had to rip the hives completely apart, which Steve ended up helping me with because it's too hard to explain what I did. I made the hive stand too long, too tall, and then I was going to feed them honey, and I put it on the top of an 8-frame stack. And 8-frame stacks are 20% higher. So anyway, I got myself into something. So he helped me unstack it, restack it, lower the hive stand down, and get it right. Okay, bye.
And Steve needed to get stung his first time anyway.
Yeah, it's your initiation.
There you go. See how bad.
My initiation was 5 stings to the face, so we all need that, right?
Geez.
Thankfully, I don't swell that much. So has anybody like used queen excluders? I haven't heard you talk about that, Eli. I know I have brood in my super that was full of honey, and then the bees obviously over the winter ate all the honey, and now it is brood comb. And so my hope is to let the brood hatch, put in a queen excluder, and make that be a honey super instead of a brood super. But I know queen excluders also damage the wings of the workers and are hard on the bees. So are there any thoughts on that you can share?
There's 2 types of queen excluders. First of all, get the right one. And then there's one, I've got a picture of it. If you email me that you want to see the 2 different types of queen excluders, I'll find it because I put it on a slide. There's one that goes the right way and one that goes at 90-degree angles, and it doesn't make any sense when you see it. You go, well, obviously this is the right one and that's the wrong one. I bought the wrong one though because I didn't know. And the wrong one is plastic, and when it's punched, it has a rough side on it because it's stamped, and a smooth side. So you might want to consider that on which way you place it. If it's easier to put the smooth side down, and maybe the bees, when they're loaded, will have an easier time going up. There's honey. Yeah, queen excluders are controversial for beginners. You don't want the brood nest to ever make the bees think it's crowded, which the bees may just feel is crowded for reasons you can't see. And then in your case, if you've already got 2 deeps or 3 westerns, then that's enough brood, definitely, right? Whatever you got.
Yeah, but they like telescoping. They're just going straight up. They don't care about those 2 empty frames on the side of my 8 frames, you know?
Did you take the beginner class?
Yes.
Okay, do you remember the frame rotation?
Yes.
Okay, so make them use that, not the reversing supers, the frame rotation.
Just checker box it.
No, that's not frame rotation. I need to find that picture. You didn't take beginner from me, probably. I don't.
Correct, but they have plenty of room. I don't feel like they don't have room. I feel like they just want.
They don't think they have room. That's the difference. Because you got to convince them they do have room, and they need to use frames 1 and 8. They need to stop skipping those and chimneying up, because especially on an 8 frame, it's going to get tippy on you in no time. You can only go so high, right?
Right.
And it's going to be tippy. Okay. A frame rotation is an actual thing. I have a diagram. Did you take it from WASBA?
I did. Well, I took it from Snohomish County Beekeeping, but I also feel like they are not they don't go out, and I'm willing to put those out frames in.
There's a way to do it, and it's called frame rotation, and there's not a great diagram of it in your manual, so I made a better one for my slides. I was going to look for what page it's on. It should be under
I can only learn what I can learn when it's happening in my life.
I know.
I can't think of frame rotation when I'm trying to figure out how to install a package.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Are you doing that this?
No, but that's
Okay.
what, like you take your first class and you're only thinking about like that one
Come
thing.
back for apprentice. Come back for apprentice, and then you go, oh, that's what she's talking about. I'm wishing I could find the page. I can send you the slide though, and you look at it, you go,
No,
oh,
I can find it. I can find it on the links that you have on the page.
On which page?
On the Facebook, if you have it in your pages at the beginning.
I don't think I put it in files. I wonder if it's actually an apprentice. I thought it was in the beginner manual. I was pretty sure.
So Dara, I've seen
it's
you
not in
around
the-
here a bit. Have you done that kind of thing?
Pardon me?
Fermentation and all that stuff, Dara?
It's Tara. What were you saying?
I'm saying, have you had to do this? I've watched you go through this process alongside me in these meetings.
Oh yeah. Oh, the frame rotation. No, I haven't had to. Well, I did have trouble where they didn't want to fill the second box very well. They did do some, but not enough.
Yeah, frame rotation. I can try explaining it, but it's so much easier when you just look at a picture of it. You got two brood boxes. They're not using the outside ones. You need them to use the outside ones because you're going to have to go that much higher if they don't. You have brood above brood, right? So
Yes.
you go to the box. They're always numbered as 1 and 2 and 3 and up. You always number from the ground up. Okay.
Yes.
So box number 1, you want them to go and use 1 and 8. You can't get them to do it. Okay. In the next box up, box number 2, you take the middle 2 frames, which have brood in them, and you're going to drop those into the middle of the 6 that they are actually using for brood. And you're not stressing them too much. You're going to take 1 and 8 and just move them straight up and put them. So you're going to spread the bottom and drop 2 brood frames down from box 2 to box 1. You're going to pick those outsides that they weren't using and move them up. What happens is that now they're forced to use those outer frames.
Oh yeah.
And they're heating it, and they got the brood smells, and the fruit is there too, because they got the bee bread ring and the honey arch barrier a little bit, not as much on the second box down, but they got it there. So you're forcing them to see the brood frame as 10, in this case, 8 frames wide. It gets really critical on an 8 frame. It does. And they don't like our thin walled hives. Okay, now the other problem you had is you want to get the brood out of those combs, like
Super.
a third box. Third box. If you're going to use a queen excluder, you just need to always make sure there's room down below to lay. And those ones that you want the brood to hatch out of, but you want them to reuse it for comb, you make sure the queen's not on them. If you have to, shake the bees gently, just a good jerk, shake, and then put the queen excluder on, put the brood above the excluder, right above the brood nest. You're not really breaking up the brood nest. This isn't a bad stress. They're going to be able to feed the brood. The heat is rising. So, and she keeps doing that. Actually, it's the workers who do it, but they keep chimneying up. So you just kind of have to do the spread thing. And when you want that brood to emerge, and you don't want her to lay more, make sure she's not on it, put it above the queen excluder. 2 full deeps is really enough. The swarm merge is the only real problem. That thing about they hurt their wings, I've only heard of that with the stamped. And you could feel the 2 sides of the queen excluder and see if you feel like you've got one of those. The other thing about queen excluders is if you don't put some brood comb above it and let the brood emerge and they refill it, sometimes bees see the queen excluder as a ceiling and they won't cross it. But as soon as you put brood up there, they go, oh, we got an entire room up here. Look at this, a whole other floor. Woo, we can use this. It's like, until then, it's an unfinished attic. If you put empty foundation above a queen excluder, they frequently don't get it. Sometimes you even put it right on top of your brood chamber and they still don't want to come up. but usually they will start coming up the center. But if you ever have a problem,
Eli, your picture is in chapter 4 of the apprentice class.
apprentice, okay, sorry. I think I do put it, I might put it in beginner because it's so basic. It's better than the reverse the supers thing, which is confusing to beginners, because the reverse at the end of the winter, you're going into spring, they've all moved up into the top boxes and the bottom box is empty. It's something you only do for overwintered hives. You seldom do it. Well, except you might do it on an 8-frame if they did something quirky like that, where they keep going up, up, up. There are chimneying hives that do that. I hope that made sense. Take apprentice, though. And Corinne, I hate to say it, but some people don't teach much in beginner. Not a lot. And you can't absorb it.
I feel like I really got into it well educated. I'm completely, happy with how I've gotten this far with my learning style. I can only learn what I'm dealing with at the moment. I can't think about what's going to happen in 3 months, but I will look to you for the apprentice class. It sounds like that might be something for the fall.
And if you can meet up with somebody here, if that's what you're kind of offering to do, if you can work it out, that is the best way. Even if you don't know any more than the other person, the two of you stand there and say, is that drone Burke home on the bottom of that hive or a queen cell? Why are they not going out to the outside? Why won't they cross the queen excluder? And between the two of you, it's just amazing. Just if you bounce ideas off somebody, you'll be able to think. And when you hit the swarm situations, you have to think on your feet, right, Pat? We're sitting there saying, okay, you don't want more hives. We've got a bunch of swarm cells. What do we do?
Yeah, what do we do?
And we didn't exactly follow the book. We did the best we could. And sometimes there are people who will tell you something worked. Okay, like we could say that destroying the swarm cells worked, but you know it didn't because you went back and you saw more swarm cells. But we shook them up. And sometimes you shake bees up on purpose. And checkerboarding is actually a technique I don't want people to do in their first year, but in the second year, then it's not so bad. You shake them up. It's a healthy, happy, strong hive. It's okay to give them a shock, a setback. For example, checkerboarding the brood nest is a problematic because you're dropping, real true checkerboarding is you're dropping like empty frames into a brood nest, into the middle of it. You're messing up their system. And if a sudden freeze or something came and they couldn't, all the foragers come in at night and the entire hive keeps the brood warm. If there's a sudden drop, and we can get freezes in late April, it happens, snow and freezes. And if you've chopped it up too much, same thing for reversing the supers. If you somehow broken up their brood nest system, then you risk setting them back too much. And that could be so stressful, it might make them susceptible to brood disease. I talk a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, come back for apprentice. And hey, I suppose you can always just not listen if I talk a lot. Anything else? Ron's a bee buddy person, so keep on his case, if you need. And if you don't think you're getting through, sometimes you can catch me last minute and I'm suddenly available too. But if you have to do an install anyway, I don't know when the packages and nukes are coming in, but some of them are coming in really late, like May. They seriously used to come in about a month earlier, and something happened. So I don't know what happened in the bee industry.
I know mine are coming in May, and I'm getting the queens from him, the Stanwood bee guy.
Yeah.
I forget his name, but yeah, I know he said like maybe close to middle of May.
Yeah, and I got some from Larry Brainerd because I know him, and those are overwintered queens, the same sort of thing. Where I don't think they're from out of state. I think Tim's are from in state. Yeah, and it's worth paying a little more, and maybe, especially if you believe in the local. I don't totally believe in the survivor bee thing and the locally adapted, but I do like supporting local people.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Take
you so
care.
much. It was great. Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Good night.
Good night.
Right there.
Good night.
Night. Okay. How's it going,
Hey,
Cindy?
Hey, Eli,
Yes, Steve.
I had those screens backwards. They come out from the back of the hive, not the front. You're right.
Okay, okay, so yeah, let's just turn it around.
Yeah.
Little screen bottom board, when you look at it, you haven't put the hive together yet. And some of
Yeah.
them don't have a landing platform, which is referred to as a robber platform by a
Right.
lot of people. So
Yeah, but it looks good now. It looks like it's ready to go, except I need some bees.
yeah. Okay. See you next
All
week.
right. You have a good night.
Okay, night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Cindy, you got any questions or oh, I can't hear you. Darn it. Can you unmute? I think you need to unmute yourself. It's not coming through. Yeah, it says you're unmuted, but you're not coming through. Volume? Earphones?
I'm going to Eli. I'll let you know if they
Okay,
swarm.
bye. Yeah, let me know. Suspense here.
Yeah, they
Cindy, you wanted to use chat? Yeah, bye, Pat. Cindy, if you use chat, maybe you can tell me. Somebody's used the headphone or something. I'm amazed Ron still has a connection. You must have gotten your satellite dish.
No, I haven't yet. Just got lucky tonight.
Okay, I think maybe this is Cindy's question. What are your thoughts about using all short westerns instead of deeps? If that's Cindy's question, I'm all for it. I can never lift a possible 100 pounds. And there is a workaround. The workaround for somebody like me is you have another box. Is that you, Cindy, asking about how about all westerns instead of using deeps? I really, really recommend it for so many reasons. Like Dara didn't say, but we ran into a problem where we couldn't do much in her hive because she had deeps, but she didn't want to buy more deeps. So she got a western, but then we couldn't get them to come up into the empty foundation, a whole box of empty foundation. They wouldn't come up and draw out the comb. Her hive just kind of died off. She bought it in the middle of the summer, so we didn't really get to know it. It was an aggressive hive, so it was hard to work on, really aggressive, like pinging, bam, 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 butting you, pinging. And she got caught in she probably could have saved the hive if she could have gotten them to build up, but they wouldn't do it. And she had deeps and westerns. We tried a really funky thing where we took one deep frame and just left nothing there and hung the deep frame through the western, hanging 3 inches into the deep. And of course that leads to brood comb and burr comb and everything else. But it was so late in the season trying that it didn't work. But if you do all one, you can do anything. You can move between anything. Some of the queen excluder problems go away because suppose you just need a little more space in the 2 deeps. You got 2 deeps. The workers backfill it with nectar, for example, and then you want to take some of that nectar out. Well, you can't just move it up without putting another deep on. If you do all westerns, your life is just really, I really believe in it. I really do. I even have this slide of, okay, how to get rid of your deeps. One deep is okay because you can use, if you're using jar feeders, it goes over quart jars. A western only goes over pint jars. But if you want to get rid of your westerns, you cut the bottom 3 inches off, and then you still got the recess. Okay, I need to take a vote. Is that rebate? I saw somebody put rebate. I know what it means in French.
It's a rabbit.